Well, hello there. I'm Doug Meadows. I'm the founder, visionary, and hero maker here at David Douglas Diamonds, and I just want to welcome you to a century of luxury and legacy as we travel through and take a look at the past 100 years of a family of jewelers um, that my grandfather created back in 1926. And in this week's episode, I'm actually in Lexington, Kentucky at an RJO show this week, and I get to go back home and be there for a few weeks before I'm not sure where I head to next. But anyways, this week I wanted to look at employees. I got thinking about my employees. I got thinking about when I worked for my dad and different other places I've worked. And then even, my dad, what kind of employees did he have? And then my grandfather, did he have employees and different things? But, when I go back to my grandfather, looking at his staff and different things, unfortunately, I don't really know a lot. I remember them talking about my grandfather having several bench jewelers working in his shop. They had one woman that was a bench jeweler that was really good, and different things. But I don't know, employment and the way we treat and work with employees over the years definitely has changed. And way back in the day, we had the unions. I mean, we still have the unions today, but there was different times, different places, different industries that needed some of that kind of help because employees definitely were being taken advantage of. And even today, not as much, I feel. Maybe I'm wrong here in the U.S., but as I travel around the world and I see different work environments, and it's not so much that they're, I guess, taking advantage of them. It's an economic culture of what they know and stuff. But when I think of my dad and uncle working for my grandfather, and one of the stories they always talked about is my grandpa would come into the shop, get it all set up, then he'd disappear for the day. And then around 3 o'clock, he would show back up at the office, and he would just check in and say, okay, what do you need help with? And then he'd sit down and knock out a bunch of stuff, and they would get it all out with the messenger or out in the mail or wherever to get it to the jewelers. And he used to really frustrate my dad. He always kind of talked about that in a negative way. But the other thing I got thinking about is just the fragility of a family business to be able to make it into 4 generations for us, and really any family business to go from one generation to the next. I know that both my dad and uncle tried to get jobs other places and actually did have jobs in other places at one point in time. And I really don't know what brought them back to the jewelry industry. But I'm thankful they ended up back there. I know it was somewhat miserable for both of them, the 2 brothers, that they weren't super fond of each other, and there was a lot of arguing up at the shop. In my dad's shop when I worked there, and it was uncomfortable for me. I mean, but that's where I learned my trade. And it was funny, I remember one day, me and my dad were going somewhere doing something or whatever, and I don't know what we were talking about that brought up the topic or subject, but he told me, he goes, I don't want you to get into the jewelry industry. I want you to go to college, get a good education, and go get a good job somewhere. And I was never, it's crazy. I graduated high school with honors. I graduated high school early. I got out in January. but it was because of a strategy. It wasn't because I was smart. I had 3 older brothers, and I watched them and I learned from them how to, I don't know, how to utilize the education system to the best of, for what was good for me. Um, they talked about different classes that were really hard, like chemistry. So I would go in and talk to my counselor and I'd say, okay, is there any other classes I can take that equal chemistry? And he gave me a list of classes and they were appealing to me. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I took things like welding, electronics, investments, real estate, typing, speed reading, um, because the other hard class that was hard for me was English. And so I think speed reading worked for that, and maybe even typing worked for that. And then I worked my credits so that I could get out in January, because my whole focus was to get out and start working and making money and getting a job. And so one of my first jobs, well, growing up, you always get a neighborhood job, whether it be cutting grass, delivering newspapers. For me, our neighbor next door, he had 5 acres and he had a bunch of horses that he needed help with. And so he would pay me and my brother to clean the stalls and feed the horses and different things. And so we did that. And then Dave, my brother, he ended up working in the factory for Ford's and making big money, so I started looking for a factory job, and I found one and started working there, and was making decent money, but nothing crazy, and then I ended up with a hernia. So back then, it wasn't an outpatient thing, it was a 2-night stay. You get in there the night before, check in, so that in the morning they could prep you, do your surgery, and then you were recovered the next day, or that day, and spent the night there. The next day they would release you. But I couldn't go back to that job. I had, I think, 8 or 12 weeks that I couldn't really lift a whole lot. Well, I could lift a file, I could do bench work and stuff, so I went back working with my dad, and stayed there ever since. I mean, but when I worked with my dad, my brother was there, my brother Dave, and I mean, I really enjoyed working with Dave. I mean, he taught me a lot. My brother Donnie worked there, my brother Danny worked there. Danny ended up getting married and actually opening up his own shop. It was called the Village Goldsmith, and he had that for a season, and then he just decided to go work for another jeweler. But Donnie, he finished up college. Dave finished up college too. Me and Dan didn't end up going to college, but Donnie ended up becoming a writer, and started out working for newspapers, and then working for publications, and then his last job was working for the CDC and doing writing there. But he's also an avid painter, does a lot of paintings and different things. But Danny's the musician of the family. You give him anything with a string and he can play it. Trying to think what me and Dave do. But, working with my dad, there was never a employee review or anything like that. You never knew how to get a raise other than just to, finally ask for it. And generally like, oh, okay, yeah, what do you want? And stuff. So, I don't know. I did not have good examples of working with staff and employees. And then, me and my brother, when we got going at Kaminsky's, I mean, we ended up with, 15 employees or so. And So that was my first time of trying to think through, well, how do I create a training manual? Or, how do I do a review for an employee? Or how do you give raises and when do you give them? And then dealing with the investment of an employee and what does that cost and how does that affect, the books and stuff. And And then, when me and Dave left Kaminsky's, and then we had the two locations. Well, while we were there, we had the pawn shop in Woodstock, we had the store in Norcross, and then we had Kaminsky's. So we, having multiple locations, multiple employees, only made the challenges harder and bigger. But, moving into where I'm at currently with what I've got going on, I was got started across the street from Kaminsky's with my rebirth of David Douglas Diamonds, and it was just me and Jen, and I was struggling trying to get all the work done plus running a business, and I was working late one night, and this guy's knocking on my door, and I mean, he was a little scruffy looking, so I was a little nervous, but because I'm not supposed to open the doors before hours or after hours to strangers. But I took a chance, opened it up, and he introduced himself to me, and he said, my pastor said I should come talk to you. He goes, I hate the job I have right now, and I want to come work for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so he had been a jeweler at another jewelry manufacturer, actually, and I was desperate, and I felt like this might be a good deal. So I swallowed hard because it was a new expense for me that I didn't know if I could afford it, but I went for it and brought him on. And it was James Grable, and he turned out to be an incredible asset to the company and a great friend to me. I really enjoyed working with him, a very talented jeweler. And but then once we moved from basically across the street from Kaminsky's, and we moved down into where our current location, things started to really grow and explode on us. While I was across the street from Kaminsky's, we're coming up into November, and I'm on a golf course, and I'm not sure, okay, I just don't want to be in the way of a ball or somebody's whatever, but anyways, we're getting close to Christmas, and it's like, how are we going to get through Christmas with the help that we have? And how can I bring somebody in November and teach them everything I need to do? And well, at that time, Hurricane Katrina hit down in Louisiana, and a lot of people displaced themselves temporarily until, they couldn't move into a house, everything was shut down, and so this girl comes into our store one day and says, hey, I'm from Louisiana. I got displaced from Katrina for a while. I just didn't know if you guys could use any part-time or, basically full-time, part-time help, meaning that she could work full-time, but it wouldn't be for very long. And I'm like, this was a godsend. She knew the software, the POS system that we were using at that time. She came from a jewelry store. She'd been working in a jewelry store for years. And it was just a plug and play, and it was such a treat to have her come and spend a short window of time with us. She was very pleasurable, and it was just such a blessing to have her come in and do that. But then as we moved down to where we're at currently in the Highland Shopping Center, and our staff began to grow and different things, I began to really start to understand the importance of staff, how to take care of staff, and that it's never done. I mean, it's constant, and you know, I mean, I could probably talk for hours on this, but you know, or maybe I'll do another session on just my staff relationship, because I'm probably good enough to stop here for now. But I don't know. We've grown a lot, both just in size and also in maturity, and just in business knowledge, people knowledge, how to take care of people, how to help people, how to work with people, um, and and staff is extremely important to us. That's, you know, one of the backbones of our success is the staff and the team that we've developed. But I think I'm going to stop here for this week, and maybe continue on talking a little bit more about that next week, and getting a little bit more in depth on some of that kind of stuff. Because like I say, I could talk for hours on it, and I know I'm trying to keep these kind of short. So I'll be signing off here from Lexington, Kentucky, from this beautiful little golf course. And I got some guys coming up on the green here now, so it's probably a good time to bug out. So until next week, you all have a great week, and hope to see you then. Bye now.